Hi, welcome back, everybody. My name is Tom Cumberledge. I'm a director in the Carbon Trust, and welcome to the Agricultural Food and Drink stage. So, as we've heard in the plenary, transition planning is absolutely key in order to navigate the plethora of reporting frameworks that are facing the sector. And the two fundamental aspects with transition planning are both having a clear plan to reduce the business's impact on the climate, while at the same time being prepared for the risks that are being posed by a changing climate and our efforts to mitigate that impact as well. So those are the two areas really, both reducing and also preparing for the risks that climate change poses on your business. As you can see from the next slide then, there's a whole range of changes being felt across the agricultural food and drink sector. Both in the first column there, you can see from increased consumer demand for more transparent information about the food and drink that they're consuming, understanding the sustainability impacts of those, and also demands driven from investors for clearer information and customers as well. So retailers pushing requirements through to the food and drink processes that they procure from. So greater demand for transparency of information there, as well as in the middle column, the need for greater technological innovation in order to drive efficiency in production and increase resilience as well. So the example here from the FAO and the UN is around technology acceleration program, and the Carbon Trust. We're also developing our own food and drink accelerator program focused on connecting technological innovations and customers as well. And on the far right, as we've seen, the changing climate is very clear and present for the agricultural sector. And specifically in the UK, last year, from between October and March, actually this year, is the second wettest period on record in the UK. That has a significant impact for farms who are unable, in many places, to crucially get to their fields because they're flooded at a crucial planting period. So that threatens food security, has knock-on effects in terms of logistical impacts across our sector that we work in. And the need, therefore, obviously, to grow resilience, to invest in infrastructure in order to combat those risks. So transition planning is an iterative process. There's four key areas that I'll walk through briefly on the slide here. So firstly, analysis, that is understanding the carbon footprint across the full value chain. It is getting a firm understanding of where those hotspots occur and also where those risks occur. So the physical risks from climate change and also those transition risks from regulatory changes, from introduction of carbon pricing or regulations and standards, etc. So getting that first analysis column is absolutely key in order to then inform the strategy for decarbonisation, the strategy about how businesses will navigate those risks and opportunities, where they manifest themselves in the value chain, and informing how they then take action on that. So how internal change can be brought about within the organization, how finance can be accessed in order to fund a lot of these changes that are required, and how the business might then collaborate in broader industry collaborations to increase resilience and to drive emissions down. And then finally, that final step there, impact, how the business is measuring and disclosing its efforts to reduce emissions and to provide a more resilient business case and business model to the investor community as well. And that's an iterative process. So only by measuring carbon footprints and measuring the key risk metrics can you then understand how you are progressing on that transition journey over time. So as I pass over to my colleague now, Isabel Divana, what I wanted to do is just do a quick poll to understand where the audience is currently at. And this will be interesting also for the panelists to reflect on, to understand where they're at. So the poll should be appearing on your screen now. What I want you to do is to answer this question really. So where are you on your transition journey, and what are the key focus areas for you in the year ahead? So are you more on the analysis piece, which is on the evaluation of where these risks and opportunities occur across your value chain, or the footprinting? Are you at that strategy piece where you're putting together plans to tackle that, maybe targets, or is it taking action? We're actually getting through to implementing those initiatives, or are you more now on the evaluation of the impact? So evaluating how you're progressing. And you can see a broad mix on the screen there, from broadly on the analysis piece, followed by some action and some strategy, a few answers changing there. So that's great. So thank you for that initial response. I'm looking forward to the panelists, and to introduce the next section, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Isabel Devanna. Over to you, Isabel.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me and see me okay. So I'm delighted to be moderating this panel. And this being the Agri-Food and Drink Theatre, or stage, as we call it, we really wanted to give you a wide view of the sector. So I have three panelists that are from the industry, some from the business sector joining us, representing a wide supply chain view. So from manufacturing and producing to retailing to distributing, including food transport. And we also have one of our consultants that's going to lend some thoughts to some of the questions we'll ask, and somebody with an expertise in sustainable finance also from our consultancy base. So we'll be really exciting panel. We have two questions for them. Before that, I'm just going to do a tiny bit of housekeeping. First is, if you need translation for this particular panel, you need to click the link under the event description. So the email that you have received from our colleagues has an event description, and there's a link there. So if you want it translated simultaneously, you can do that. Secondly, please submit questions through the chat. We're going to do our best to answer your questions as delegates. The challenge that we have is we're running a little bit late, and if I know a panelist, they're going to speak for a little bit longer. Everybody's going to try to stick to their 5 minutes allotted slot for each of the questions. But I promise I'll try my best to answer your questions. So please submit them via the chat. Only the event organizers and myself can see for now. And what we'll do is we'll sieve through. If I can, I might merge a couple of questions together, to be fair. Is that okay? I hope so. I can't see you, so I'm imagining you're nodding in enthusiasm and acceptance of all of that. So let's bring my panelists in, if we can. They're coming in, they're coming in, they're coming in. Amazing. So what I do is I'm going to ask the first question, and as they answer, they're going to answer in order. And as they answer, they're going to also introduce themselves a little bit in their company, so you know who they are. And the first question that we wanted to ask is, obviously we have this alphabet soup of reporting. CSRD, TCFD, GRI, SRS, TNFD, ISSB, SASB. I mean, it's very confusing, and it's confusing for companies internally to implement that. And as Tom said, there's quite a lot of internal change that needs to happen in companies in order to engage stakeholders, in order to get people on board and normalize sustainability reporting, working backwards to sustainability analysis and action, and devising the strategy, as many of you have said, is the stages of your companies as delegates. So what are your companies doing to tackle the reporting? What are you doing to engage your stakeholders internally? How are you going about it? And are there any lessons you'd like to share about this? And I'd like to first give the opportunity to Joanne to speak. So let's go to Joanne first.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you as well. So I'll just introduce myself briefly. So my name is Joanne Grace. I'm head of ESG governance reporting for Glanbia, and basically I have responsibility for overseeing our adherence with the ESG regulations that are here now and the ones that are coming down the track, and most notably, from my point of view, that would be CSRD. So just in terms of a brief introduction to Glanbia for context in terms of what we're doing in terms of building out the reporting capabilities. Glanbia is headquartered in Ireland. We're listed on both the Irish and London Stock Exchange. So from a regulatory point of view, primarily Ireland and UK are our key regulations, but also then we have multiple demands from different stakeholders, be it our customers or investors, that we also need to make sure that we're supporting. In terms of Glanbia itself, our roots very much are rooted in the agricultural sector. We come from a cooperative background and have evolved into a multinational organisation focused on nutrition. Primarily, our footprint would be within North America, and that would be one of our key markets as well. So we really look at Glanbia in two main pieces. We have our B2C side of the business, which is Glanbia Performance Nutrition, and that holds a plethora of brands, including Optimum Nutrition, Nutrimino, Isopure, and SlimFast. So it's very much a broad category of brands that focus in on that health and well-being side. And then on the B2B side, it's very much looking at innovation and ingredient solutions for our customer piece, which is also then supported by some strategic dairy partnerships and joint ventures. So, a broad base in terms of both B2C and B2B, but very much a weave of dairy going through it, which poses its own problems from a sustainability point of view in relation to how we tackle those from a strategy perspective. So in terms of then to your question, Isabel, around like what we're doing to address the alphabet soup and making sure that we're ready for the reporting requirements, we've taken a very conscious decision within Glanbia that we have a centre of excellence that supports the business unit, but that we really want to integrate the reporting drivers at a business unit level, so that it's not like an add-on or a bolt-on, that it's very much integrated into how and what we do from an operational point of view. So that if you're sitting in ops, your energy data, it drives efficiency, and also it supports our scope 1 and 2 objectives. So that's very much a conscious decision where we support at the center, but we do want to integrate it within the business. From a reporting point of view, we've taken some conscious decisions over the last few years in terms of how and what we report. So for example, because we're listed on the London Stock Exchange, we had to report under TCFD from 2021. I think that's been a very positive piece. It's where, it's formally driven us to review, okay, what does climate risks and opportunities mean for us as an organization? So from strategy to our governance to how it's integrated into our risk register, it's really been a very tangible piece where we've got cross-functional engagement through workshops and finalizing what we identified as our key risks and opportunities. So that has been key, and I think that's evolved and grown over the last few years, even just in terms of understanding the terminology, the concepts. It's very much broadened the base understanding within our organization. And the other key piece from a reporting point of view, I would say, was taking the decision to make sure our sustainability report was in accordance with the GRI standards. So previously we would have used them, but not in that systematic way. And for us, that was very important from the point of view of when we look at CSRD and we look at the ESRAs that are coming under CSRD, they didn't start from a blank page when we look at what EFRAG developed. So from our point of view, looking at what GRI has there plus TCFD, it's just integrated and made it more systematic in terms of how we do things. And by aligning with GRI, we also looked at our internal structures. So we've identified topic owners, preparers, reviewers, approvers. So that discipline that would certainly be needed in the CSRD world has begun under the GRI structures. And we've built and grown, I guess, on top of that over the last 2 years to more formally build out a steerco and incorporate those within the organization. So I think that's something that formalized structure, building out the accountability, roles and responsibilities, it sounds basic, but it really has integrated how we do things and how we make sure that we are ready for what's coming. I don't know, just in terms of engagement and lessons learned, I would say baseline understanding. We've integrated training. We have some resource tools that are available to everyone in terms of terminology and cheat sheets and all of that stuff, which is important because look, there's no getting away. This is a new language, new concepts, and at times when you're in the bubble, you think everybody knows what you're talking about, and that's just not true. So often when you're talking to a group, you do need to bring it back to the basics and try and avoid the acronyms. And in terms of like what we've learned so far, I think it's, again, bringing it back to the basics. It can be overwhelming, and especially under CSRD. So bringing it back to that work stream structure for us has really helped, so that we're bringing it down to a particular topic level, particular owners, and looking at it from that kind of structural point of view has really helped us, I would say. And then I guess it's like, in terms of communication and just reiterating why this is important, I think that's another piece. At times, there can be a lot of focus on the volume of what's required and not maybe necessarily looking at why this is required. So in terms of like focusing in on, this is about displaying progress and about, showing how we are managing and how our strategy lines up with these risks and opportunities, as opposed to really focusing in on there's X number of metrics or data points to be disclosed. That's a sideline in my mind. It's really like, what was the intention of this requirement from day one? So I think that's an important piece. And I think from a communication point of view, explaining the why is very important, not just the what in terms of the specific data points, if that makes sense.
Excellent. No, that's really great. Thank you so much. This is a really good perspective, and obviously you've been reporting since 2021. Now there'll be other companies that haven't done their reporting yet. They're preparing for their first, or companies that won't be reporting until 2026, for example. So I'm going to bring in Lynn now from Greggs to give some perspectives, and again, just focus on what you want to talk about in terms of what are you doing to tackle the need for reporting, how are you using this to engage your stakeholders and including your customers, if you want to talk about that, and what lessons have you learned so far?
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm Lynn Bell. I'm a Sustainability Manager at Greggs. I am deputising for Paul Rhodes. So if there's people in the audience who are expecting to see Paul, I apologise for that. He's been called away unexpectedly. And I think for me, I just support most of what Joanna said previously. I think reporting has come a long way, and reporting obligations are definitely becoming more demanding, more complex, and you now need to add a greater level of granularity and detail, and that brings about some challenges internally. We have a small team, a small sustainability team, which we've just evolved over the last couple of years, and the people within this team are new. But luckily for us, I think what we've done is we try to stay up to date with what's coming through. So, we're regularly scanning the horizon to see, right, what's coming in, what is a priority, what do we need to report? Because there's lots of things that you do historically because you report because it's the nice thing to do. But is it legal? Is it a legal requirement? Not always. And sometimes, your investors are pushing you to go into certain indices to report certain information, where actually, TCFD has had a huge impact on us, and we have moved our annual report to actually coincide with TCFD reporting. So we have that structure set up. So once you know what you're going to report to, we took the decision as a business that actually, whilst a number of people were doing this reporting, and it tended to be myself and my boss, Paul, actually we couldn't continue doing that. So we brought a dedicated resource into our team. And now we have a dedicated resource who does look at all the different reporting we have to do. She looks at everything that's coming in. She looks at all the questions that are being asked, and she will then generate a gap analysis, and we will look at where are our gaps in what we're not reporting. And then we look to try and close them out or progress them. And we're on a journey where actually we are moving forward. Sometimes not always at the pace you'd like to see, but everybody has a day job, and it's not priority for these other teams as well. It's an add-on to their day job, but it is important for the business. So we do carry out a gap analysis, try and fill those gaps. And we've also, in addition to that, set up a specific steering group just recently that is looking at reporting. So it's a reporting steering group, because we see the evolving of legislation and, the compliance to fulfill the requirements of these standards as important to our business. And we do believe that it does help us move forward. So, having transition plans and having them formally publicly made available is an important part on that journey. And we haven't publicised our transition plan yet because we're still just working through it. But hopefully by the end of the year, we will have a transition plan which is publicly available so people can see what we're doing. We know ideally what we need to do. And whilst we haven't published that plan, we've started some of the work on that because you can't just stand still. But, I think transition plans have come through reporting. And that has helped us move on. And if it wasn't for that reporting structure, we would not have probably produced a transition plan. So, we are being forced into doing that. I think from an engagement point of view, we've really had to engage with our finance team because in the past it has just been a sustainability team that did everything sustainable, and you'd have to go out and get the buy-in of other people. And basically we've identified that, our finance team really needs to buy into that because they're the ones that, provide the finance to do all the projects that we do. And, we've also engaged with our risk team because, a lot of the risks go through our risk register and our risk committee. So therefore, it's important to gauge internally, but it's also important to engage externally with our key stakeholders. And for us, the biggest impact we see is from our agricultural supply chain, because our scope 3 is significantly from agriculture, because whilst we're a retail business and we also produce our own products, and we're heavily reliant on the dairy sector and the beef, the chicken, the pork sector, which is highly carbon intensive. So we have to engage those stakeholders. So, as part of our transition planning, we are now starting to engage with those. So we've done some questionnaires initially and with all our key stakeholders that are priority to us to say, right, what are your plans? We've asked, do the set climate change, have they set transition plans? Have they got science-based targets? And now we're looking at, right, we've got that information, what we're going to do with it. And we're now starting to have conversations with individual suppliers to say, right, how can we support you and how can you support us? And it's surprising to see a lot of our agricultural suppliers actually are probably further ahead than what we are in reality with this. So they're doing lots of good work around this. So we're just now starting to say, right, how do we support you and how do you support us in our plans? Because it is a joint initiative. What have we learned? I think the things that we've learned is that the reporting requirements change continually, and you have to be on board with that and keep an eye on what's coming in and what's important. It does take a long time and it does take a lot of time up to do. And if you're going to do it properly, you need to put valuable time into that to get some real value from it. The key thing for us definitely is engaging and getting our finance team on board, because finance do all our financial reporting, and carbon is as important as our finance data. And because we've now got them engaged and they're taking on all the carbon data collation of our footprint and of our reports, actually goes through the same rigorous routes that the business data goes through. So that's a key learning from us. And I think the other thing is that we hope that, the introduction of some of this new reporting requirements will be streamlined, because there's just so much out there. So we're hoping that ISSB will streamline some of the reporting requirements, because there's just so much that you have to do. And, ultimately you need to be in a position where you're giving value to everybody, but you can't just continue to do what we're doing currently, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and I'm sure that will resonate with a lot of our colleagues. Thank you so much. We're going to now go to Nick, who's going to be telling us the perspective of DP World. Oh,
thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm Nick, VP Sustainability at DP World. So we're an interesting business as a very large global business headquartered in the UAE. So I have some global reporting requirements, and I look after the European region. So my global colleagues in places like Sub-Saharan Africa and America and EMEA, they APAC region, sorry, they're quite glad they don't have to do the same scope of regulatory-based disclosures and reporting as we do. So I don't want to repeat the same sort of. I think the first two speakers have kind of covered a lot of the process and the activities that they've gone through. So I don't want to repeat those. What I would say is we've taken, I've taken quite a risk-orientated approach. I mean, we found that trying to get sustainability measures and get the right reports and impacts created requires really good relationships with finance. But I think we know that. I mean, really CSRD and with TCFD and TNFD, because they're all Bank of England creations. By the way, I call them alphabeti spaghetti rather than the alphabeti soup. I like the alphabeti spaghetti of it. We know finance is a key partner, and that's where a lot of the reporting has been. And if we get finance on board, we can usually get the investments and impacts of sustainability into the business in a different way than sustainability is managed in the past. But the missing function that we should be including is the risk team. And of course, when we think about both the transition and physical risks when it comes to nature and climate, but also I think with the additional requirements of human rights due diligence and modern slavery in Europe, we have to look at it from a risk-based approach, and then the avoidance of risk and the taking of opportunities comes through them. So the basis of the TCFD and TNFD in helping drive through success in the business, uncovering where you have gaps has been mentioned, and then closing them, I think is a really important aspect that's often underplayed. The TCFD and TNFD disclosures, we forget that it's about linking the risk to the business finances as a result. So my number one recommendation to everyone would be, just as you include the finance team, include the risk team at the same time. That's it from me.
Thank you. That's it for you on this one. Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to go now to my colleague Tiff. Tiffany, as we should call her, from Carbon Trust, and then to Toby. We're going to briefly explore the perspective from a consultancy and also the perspective of green finance for this before we move on to our next question for the panelists.
Excellent, thank you, Isabel. So I'm going to try and bring a different perspective and say something a little bit different than what's already been said. But I think where we see the businesses that we see kind of being most successful in this area are really the ones that obviously, focus on risks, but also have a focus on opportunities and what different regulatory frameworks can actually uncover in terms of opportunities for their business, in terms of how they might further develop USPs, how they might change the way they do business in the long term, and also really, and we've heard this from a couple of the panelists already, really integrate performance and KPIs with these metrics and aligning with the kind of sustainability metrics that are so important. So I think risk, it's really easy to focus on risks, but I would really encourage companies to also have a think about how can you go deeper into the opportunity side, and how can those opportunities actually be quantified and planned into your business plan going forward as well. I'll keep it short and brief.
Thank you, Tiff. That's great. And that's going to link very nicely to our second question. Before that, of course, we'll go to Toby, who's going to talk a bit about from the sustainable finance perspective.
Thanks, Isabel, and I'll try and keep it brief here as well. As Isabel mentioned, I work on the sustainable finance team here at the Carbon Trust. So not only working with the financial sector to decarbonize themselves, but also financing for the decarbonization of the economy. So we work very closely with corporates here as well to kind of understand what is available to them to finance the transition and how to finance those transition and decarbonization plans that they put into place. So with the reporting requirements that have come out, I think it's very natural that there's a need and natural step of assessing your company strategies and your sustainability targets and goals. So looking at it from the sustainable finance perspective, we're seeing a lot of companies, and particularly within the agri, food, drink, and retail space, ask the questions of, well, now that we have our plans and targets in place, how actually do we finance this transition as a company? And not only that, taking the step back and looking at the value chain, what is everybody else doing and how do we ensure that we're on the same page as everybody else so that we can really leverage efficiencies, financial and otherwise. So I think the panelists have mentioned this, but we've seen this really lead to open conversations within companies, because whereas before it was the sole focus and remit of the sustainability team, now we're seeing the finance team sit in on those conversations. Before it's been very siloed. So in order to drive the change, you need the link to your finance team, which is the link to the financial institutions, which is obviously where the capital is going to come from to finance the transition. So it's great that regulations and reporting requirements are driving this, because where it might have been a natural, organic transition to have these teams sit in the room, I feel it's very much fast-tracked, having everybody in the same room and having the conversations that are really important and closing the gaps to reach what is needed for sustainable finance to step in and actually drive change.
Thank you. This leads us really nicely into the second question, and I think from my perspective, going back to what Laura said at the opening speech, it's companies have focused a lot on quality of data and quality of reporting, quality of analysis of what they're doing in terms of thinking about sustainability. They've also thought about the quantity of what they're doing, but not all companies have really rethought fundamentally what they're doing as a business, if their business model is resilient, if the product portfolio and the services portfolio is resilient in a world of net zero. The things that really need to change to create, as Steve said, opportunity and growth in the long term rather than business as usual with a little bit of cutting down emissions here and there. It's been a pet peeve of mine since I worked at Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. Oh my goodness, almost 15 years ago. It's been a pet peeve of mine when I was executive director at Renewable UK, for example. I worked with Bench and Ørsted. It's companies really that are rethinking fundamentally what they do, that are really tapping into the opportunities of net zero, and they are able to grow sustainably and resiliently, if that's a word. So what I wanted to throw to the panelists is this question. I mean, there's been disappointment from many companies that went after Paris Agreement and set targets. There's been disappointment they haven't met those targets. Many of them are now walking back and saying, well, we're not really going to be able to meet this. Don't need to speak about your company specifically, speak from the heart, but also from your perspectives, and tell us, I mean, what do you think companies need to do to make sure that they can deliver on these climate ambitions? You know, what should they be thinking about? And what I'll do now is I'll be fair and reverse the order of the panel. So I'll go to Nick first, and then Joanne, and then Lynn, if that's okay. So let's start with Nick.
Sure. Well, look, let's be frank. Let's be really honest and frank about it, because I don't think people often are. The reason most companies have failed on their pathways at the moment is because they haven't addressed their business model in any regard. That's the number one reason. My previous roles have been in fashion and apparel companies. They are delusional about their ability to deliver on net zero. Frankly, I've seen more clever tricks in hiding emissions and dodgy claims around life cycle analysis that I've seen in anywhere. And that's primarily because almost all of the business models are based on volume growth, and what we've seen is a reduction in quality, a reduction in resilience, a reduction, pushing Scope 3 emissions out in the supply chain as far as possible. Most of them have, 99.9% of their emissions are Scope 3. Some of them, my previous one, when I was at one place, haven't set a net zero goal. And when we had the discussions with the board, they admitted, because they knew they couldn't grow if they set a net zero goal. Well, at least they were honest. So I think, first of all, most businesses are not addressing the hard reality of their business model. That's the first one. The second one is the question of who pays. This always comes up. So there's a fundamental belief that customers will not pay for more sustainable options. I think it depends on the business sector you're in. We're in, DP World covers freight forwarding, freight services, really getting stuff from A to B through ports and terminals, on feeder ships, on trucks. we know customers are willing to pay more actually for sustainable options. When we look at our customers, we have some customers who have very, very stringent emissions and sustainability goals, and yet they are willing to pay more. But when you look at the commercialization models, you're not doubling the prices. You know, if you look at the cost of jeans that are delivered net zero, it goes from $40 to 40.40 cents. So it's marginal, you know. Ultra low emission concrete in a building might cost 75% more for the concrete compared to traditional concrete, but in the construction of the building, it costs 1% more. So we need to think very differently about the end-to-end business model, I think, when it comes to the commercialization. So you know, I'll stick to those two, you know, because the first one is frank enough, and there'll be some unhappy people when I express it this way. But that is a fundamental reality. You want to hit net zero, you're gonna have to change your business model. There's no other way around it, and you need to think about the future business models and not the past. And the regulations are coming for you anyway, regardless. So if you don't change now, you're a dead business.
Yeah, it's obviously as a consultant, I like to hear that, but it's been my view since I worked in academia, basically looking at that. So
it doesn't mean necessarily we're always delivering, right? I know the position that I come from is very easy for me to be judgmental, but I think it is a frank thing where we have to look at our business models and say, you know, could this ever be, you know, fast fashion will never be a sustainable business. There's impossible. So to either change it or wait until regulation takes you out of business.
Yeah, but it's having the foresight and thinking ahead and anticipating the next trend is, I think, what we obviously as consultants try to encourage clients to do. Let's go to Joanne as our next speaker.
Yeah, thanks Isabel. And I think some interesting themes brought up there by Nick in terms of the who pays question. That's certainly predominant in our business as well from a dairy point of view. But I liked what Tiff said in terms of like there's opportunity here. So from our point of view, going through the TCFD exercise over the last few years has really, I guess, focused and endorsed our strategy to a large extent. So I think it's kind of a tale of two halves. Scope 1 and 2 within our four walls, much more manageable. And it's really, I guess, given greater impetus and emphasis on the importance of what we're doing in that space. So scope 1 and 2 in terms of like building operational efficiencies and looking at how and what we use from an energy point of view. That's all, it's driven tangible change. And I think it's brought buy-in from the business in terms of seeing, okay, this actually not also contributes to our sustainability strategy, but also it helps our bottom line. And that's like what our senior leadership, that's what they like to speak to. So I think that piece has been an easy and relatively quick wins. The elephant in the room obviously is scope 3. And from a Glanbia point of view, when we look at it, approximately 80% is scope 3 and dairy, which is not an easy nut to crack. And I think from our point of view, for our existing targets, we've aligned with the Paris Agreement. We haven't spoken to net zero. I think we're being pragmatic in terms of let's get over one hurdle and then look to the next. And from our point of view on the scope 3 side, it's very much working out commercially viable options that work for our supply base, provide a value add for our customers that ultimately gets that sweet spot where, you know, we're coming up with a commercially viable solution for all parts of the value chain. And that's something we're investing a lot of time in at the moment in terms of just coming up with an articulated roadmap around that. And I would say one of the key contributors from a Glanbia point of view, and I think this is a kind of a general piece, is that governance element, that you have, you know, the support and backing of the board and senior leadership in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And from my point of view, that's been very, very evident in terms of what we're doing from a Glanbia point of view. We have a dedicated sustainability committee, and they've been brought lockstep through the journey in terms of what we're trying to do in the scope 3 space. So, you know, in terms of very challenging, there's fundamentals that need to be addressed. But I think there's great opportunity, and from our point of view, we're taking it a building blocks approach. Net zero is obviously the long-term goal, but for us, it's let's align with what we have from in terms of the Paris Agreement stand or targets, and then move on to the next piece, because that's where our mindset is currently. So but I would emphasize we see this as opportunity to be a solutions provider and a partner in particular with our dairy supply chain.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Just to remind the audience, please submit your questions through the chat function so we can see them. We're going to go now to Lynn, and Lynn's going to give us a perspective. I was interested in the point that Nick raised, which is who pays, and we've had a conversation offline, haven't we, Lynn, about who pays for that, and how does the consumer feel about sustainable products and others. So feel free to explore what you want, but I'm definitely keen to hear more from your perspective on that if you want to share.
Yeah, thank you. I think, you have to have clear targets and public targets, which have robust reporting that go alongside them, and you have to go all in, I suppose, with your actions and the opportunities as well, to progress that journey towards net zero. Because I just don't think it's adequate just to sit on the fence and do nothing, because you're not going to be a viable business if you just sit back and wait for all the technologies to come through. And we have some significant challenges, especially around Scope 1 emissions, about, replacement of diesel, degasification of the natural gas system. But you can't just sit still and do nothing. So you have to find an interim until those technologies come along. And I think you have to prioritize the most material and most impactful ones, because it's no good going with the low-hanging fruit if it's not material to your business, because that's not going to achieve anything, because you're not going to reduce your emissions greatly and get to that net zero goal. I think it's also about not being afraid to say, that potentially you are struggling and there are difficulties. It's about being honest and saying we've tried our best, but, the technology isn't there. So we'll do something as an interim step until that technology comes along. And, it was interesting on the business model, because, I think that's a good point that was raised. And Greggs has seen significant growth year on year. And that almost puts a blocker on that decarbonisation path to some extent. So you have to try and decouple it. And when I looked, I thought, right, our products are generally meat-based products. So, Greggs is known for its sausage roll. Sausage roll is highly carbon intensive, but our customers love it. And we're not going to necessarily change our business model, because our customers are saying this is what we want. And if we suddenly change everything, we lose our customers, and they go somewhere else where they can get that product. And I think, we have introduced plant-based products. So we do have a vegan sausage roll. And I think we thought that actually that would help reduce the number of normal meat-based sausage rolls that we were producing and selling. And in fact, it hasn't. It's just, it's opened the market to a new customer base, which we've never had before. So we haven't seen that reduction from introducing plant-based. And plant-based obviously does have a much lower carbon impact, but actually it doesn't always go in hand that if you introduce a plant-based product, it's going to reduce your meat-based product. So I think thinking about that business model is really important. And I think the one thing that I would add to that is that you have to work collaboratively within your industry and cross-sector as well. And, I think it's fine to say we need help on this, and there are expertise out there that can support you on this journey. And, we are partnering with Carbon Trust, so we've always used Carbon Trust. And, it's good to have them on board to say, actually, you can help us in our journey to net zero as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a fantastic point. I'm going to go to Toby next for a bit of insight on that sustainable finance. It's interesting because, as Chris said earlier, and as Nick said, some of it is regulatory, and obviously we don't want more regulation than necessary. But I always go back to thinking about the plastic bags, right? I mean, overnight, with one small piece of legislation, it changed behavior of consumers in a way that you wouldn't imagine. I wouldn't suggest that the government does anything as dramatic as that in terms of meat producing. It would actually be wrong, I think, to do that. But there is power, and I think going back to the theme of our session on the reporting, there is power in having to report and having to think about those things and put them down. That prompts companies to some extent to work backwards from that, and sometimes alter their business model or alter their portfolio and their top line growth avenues in ways that they otherwise wouldn't. So Toby, over to you.
Thanks, Isabel. Thanks for that setup for, I think, a very interesting discussion on sustainable finance and the role it will play. So with the regulations that are coming through, we're obviously seeing a lot more focus on the how. So previously we did see net zero targets, sustainability targets being set, perhaps without the proper thought process between how it is actually going to be achieved or what actually needs to be implemented. So that question is how now do we implement and actually drive the impact that we have committed to? And I think it's a good question and one that has been raised by our panelists, the who pays question, and whether or not that can be borne by the customer, whether it can be passed through, which might need a bit more time than we have in the panel to actually go into the depths of. But before that cost can perhaps be passed on, it does need to be incurred by companies at first, either as an investment into shifting their business model or an investment into more sustainable business practices to achieve those sustainability targets and goals. So again, bringing it back to the sustainable finance piece, which is a very crucial piece of the puzzle. Actually, the Climate Bonds Initiative just came out with a paper last week on the importance on the transition in the agri-food sector and also sustainable debt and the specific role it has to play in transitioning the industry. So the gap that we're really seeing within this space is previously a lack of understanding both from the financial services sector and the financial institutions as to the nuances within the specific industry. A lot of the times we see financial institutions operating within a very small set box, criteria, requirements that might not translate to what's actually needed in the sector. So I do think that we've come a very long way in understanding the particular requirements and also in education on the side of agri-food, drink, and retail industry as to what they actually need to provide to financial institutions and banks to gain access to the transition finance as well. And speaking on that progress, I think that there are now a lot of sustainable debt and finance instruments that can not only help finance the transition, but also hold companies to account. So if we look, for example, at sustainably linked finance instruments, which have KPIs, so key performance indicators or targets linked to a company's sustainable targets, then not only does the company have access to finance the transition they're looking for, but also they need to meet these specific targets and KPIs, which holds them accountable to whatever has been set. And I think our keynote speaker also, Laura Clark, mentioned this briefly in her speech today, is that these targets and measures linked to the sustainable financing need to be material to the industry. So looking at the agricultural space, I think we need to teach and learn and educate the sector and the financial institution on what exactly that is, whether it be biodiversity, natural capital, natural resources. I think that's an ongoing discussion, but something that we've come a long way in the sustainable finance and financial institution sector. So I think that hopefully will drive a lot of forward motion.
Thank you, Toby. I'm going to go finally for this final second question of our panel to my colleague Tiff at the Carbon Trust. So Tiff,
amazing. So I would say from my perspective, you know, having clients that are maybe missing targets or walking away from targets, and I think probably disappointment isn't really it's not a useful feeling, right? So I would kind of encourage clients that are in that position, that are kind of struggling to see the way forward, to actually feel empowered, because, you know, failure actually is a way that we can then decide and choose and feel empowered to do things differently and to be to try things that we maybe would not have had the opportunity to try before. And I think we always say that, you know, there's no silver bullet in solving all of our sustainability problems, issues, challenges. But actually, maybe that's true. Maybe there's no silver bullet, but we do have collaboration, and collaboration is really a superpower that we're not harnessing enough. I think as a partner that works with companies across the full food chain, from farming all the way through to retail, we have so many customers that have aligned goals that are aligned. So um, they're all trying to decarbonize, they're all trying to get to the same point, but they're not necessarily talking to each other, or not in a way that is constructive, or in a way that they can actually leverage each other's strengths and create true strong partnerships that lead to kind of beneficial gain. So I think that is what I would kind of finish on, is that we do need to have more collaboration, and collaboration can also lead to a sharing of the burden between the different players in the sector, in terms of who pays and who invests in the things that are going to be critical for us to be able to meet the goals that have been set, and really transition the industry to one that is more aligned with a net zero world.
Thank you, Tiff. That's excellent, and the collaboration is really key and critical to achieving net zero. We thank you so much to the audience. We have lots of different questions, and some of them are quite specific. So I'm going to ask, because we're almost out of time and the events team will kick us out, I'm going to ask one question to all the panelists. So feel free to jump in and answer. The question is, how can you assure data quality and comparability between different partners in the value chain, applying the same calculation frameworks? Because that's bringing us back to the issue of collaboration, to the issue of stakeholder engagement, and the issue of working across the entire value chain and the supply chain in order to make that work. How are you doing this in your companies? Do you want to share a little bit, so that other companies that are at an earlier stage perhaps of their journey can plan for success in this area?
I'm happy to start off. I mean, look, this is a really difficult question. I don't think there's an easy answer for it. And it's probably a question that everyone's trying to solve. So the first thing I think is about working with your procurement team on making sure that you've got good standards when they're going out and working with suppliers, but also this happens with contractors as well, so upstream as well. Particularly this big thing for our Scope 3 emissions is upstream and contractors and subcontractors and partners. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that there's some really good reporting platforms out there now that help you to do this. We're just in discussions with one ESG reporting platform. We're going to take it on for a year and see how it works for us. But I think primarily it's about engagement with your supply chain, talking about standards. And remember, they will be dealing with other companies that may have varying standards at the same time. So that there almost certainly is no simple answer for this. It's got to be to say, look, we're going to work from aligned requirements to standards. This is the way we're going to put in the data. But for every supplier that you have, and the thousands of suppliers some of you will have, they will be delivering to thousands of customers. And if each one requires something different, frankly, you're just going to have to deal with what they send you, I guess, and pull it in. And that's going to be a tough journey for all of us. Hopefully CSRD and the other ISSB standards will bring uniformity to this approach over time. But there's some opportunities in machine learning and digital tools that can help.
Perfect.
Yeah, I would just building on that, Nick. I think from a Glanbia point of view, primarily our supply chain data is the key keynote to crack, I would say. So from our point of view, we have brought sustainability and procurement together to collaborate and just be very clear on what specific data points do we need to support our reporting, and ensuring that we have what we like to see from a reporting point of view: consistency and completeness. And that piece is, I think, an ongoing journey in terms of how do we get the raw data that we need in order to support our reporting. So that piece, I think, is ongoing, and the theme of collaboration certainly very important there. I think we're in the coalface of that as well, from the point of view our customers, we're part of their supply chain, so we're equally seeing that coming through. So questionnaires in multiple forms and multiple data points is coming through. So we're seeing it on both sides. And I think the hope is certainly, like what you're saying, Nick, that with more standardized reporting going forward, and this becoming, table stakes as opposed to a nice to have, that we will see the industry catching up in terms of, being able to provide the information that we require on both sides of the coin, I would say. So that's something that I think will evolve. And I think under CSRD, I think there's a recognition in terms of value chain is difficult because it's outside your four walls, and having that 3-year transition in terms of having to report the data points will support on that. But I think that time will be needed.
Thank you, Joanne, for that. Lynn, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think exactly what everybody said. I think, you just have to go ultimately initially with what you've got and hope that those suppliers have gone through the same rigorous routes and reported through, the greenhouse gas protocol and all these standards. So that their data is reliable, and actually that they've gone through some verification process themselves with the likes of, Carbon Trust or another authority, so that, the data has been verified. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to start somewhere. And I think all the, the legislation that's coming through, all the standards that are now coming through will only improve that data.
Thank you. Absolutely. I have another question for the panel, which is important and is very, very timely, which is about FLAG. And both FLAG split, of course, but also the FLAG pathways that require commitment and actions on deforestation. Do any of the panelists want to share any of their perspectives on what approach are they taking to monitor and report on these commitments? And then perhaps Tiff can answer from your perspective as well as to what you're seeing our clients do, because this is something that is at everybody's mind, on everybody's mind, I think I should say. Anybody wants to talk about FLAG?
We haven't, so under CDP is done by our head office team at the moment. So I don't believe we've made submissions for FLAG. Now, that's primarily, first of all, because we don't have anything, well, initially, I would say as a business, we don't have many raw material products that would impact deforestation from a land use. We're not growing cotton and things like that. But there's some really interesting aspects to this, which I think is there's some secondary and tertiary effects that we really need to think about when we think about deforestation. And for us, it's the use of alternate fuels and biofuels, so HVO, hydrogenated vegetable oil, for those who aren't familiar with an additional alphabeti spaghetti. 3-letter abbreviation. I, for one, am horribly unenthusiastic about HVO. I think the risks around palm oil and deforestation is high. And I did see the report about the lack of companies actually reporting on FLAG with CDP. I think it was in the news just a couple of days ago, or maybe I saw it somewhere else. So it's a very timely question, and actually I think it's something that we need to have another look at, and it is high on the agenda. So I think the point here is that when we're looking at deforestation, it's not just about your direct use. One of the things the nature-related financial disclosure, which we've nearly completed our first case study, has revealed, is that it's really easy to make an assumption that your business is not impacted by these things. But when you start to look at the way your business operates and your customers, quite quickly so for us, if there's if we have risks around nature and climate on food products and agriculture, we don't make it and we don't sell it, but we do transport a lot of it. And initially we thought, this won't impact us, but actually it quite heavily impacts our business. So FLAG and deforestation is something that all companies, I believe, will have an impact and need to dig through their supply chain, even if it's very, very far down. So it's a great question. I have no good answers for you, but it is something that we need to take more seriously, I think, as a whole.
Thank you, Nick. Joanne, Lynn, you want to come in?
From my perspective at Greggs, I suppose, we're just starting our journey with FLAG. So we have split our emissions out for FLAG, because the majority of our emissions in Scope 3 do fit in that agriculture part. and we're just about to embark on setting a science-based target along the flag route. But we haven't done that yet, but that has to be done by the end of the year. So that is imminent. And going back to Nicholas's point of view, I have slightly different opinion on HVO, because I think if it comes from a sustainable source and you're using sustainable palm oil, and you can prove that journey, I think, for us, we are starting to use HVO in our fleet to try and transition away from the dirtier fuel, which is diesel. It is an interim measure until electric or hydrogen comes along. So, it's an interesting debate, isn't it? Different people have different opinions on what's good and what's bad. And, we are going to continue using palm oil. And it's actually, if you don't use palm oil, you just move to another substance or another material. Is that material more damaging than what the sustainable palm oil route is? So I do think it depends where you're buying your palm oil from, and it needs to be down that sustainable route. And we need to be doing everything possible. But just to take palm oil out of everything, and it's in so many products, it's unbelievable, is a huge challenge, and it won't happen overnight.
Yeah. No, and it's a really good point, and that's why sustainability is tricky, is because there's no one single answer or one easy answer to things, and there will be trade-offs for all of us to explore. Joanne, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I think, I'd agree with the comments made from a Glanbia point of view, similar boat to Lynn. We're working through the not flag and non-flag and what that means for our targets at the moment. When I think about deforestation, the big theme from a Glanbia point of view is really the accuracy of the data and that country of origin question. And in terms of just getting to the point where, we understand where our supplier is based. That's not necessarily where the commodity is coming from. And that's a piece we're working through currently, just in order for us to be able to, I guess, commit to that deforestation commitment that is required, and to really understand what do we need to do internally around, like to your point, Lynn, do you go down the certification route? What other, assurance requirements do you need to put in place to make sure that we can stand up to that commitment? So for us, that's the big nut to crack in terms of for us to really understand and how to get to that source data piece around the country of origin. And we're working through that currently. And again, kind of the theme around collaboration comes through again. And our poor old procurement folk, they've really been inundated with different requirements, but this one is coming at them like a steam train in terms of that piece, and it's just becoming more and more onerous. That supply chain due diligence is going nowhere. So that's kind of the key theme, I would say, taking from that piece.
Excellent. Tiff, do you want to come in for a final point before we thank everybody? Final.
Exactly. I think I completely understand kind of the nervousness that exists around this kind of area, and we do have clients that maybe have targets but haven't gone for submission, for example, because they don't want to commit to something they don't know how to deliver. I think the good news, there is a little bit of good news in this. First of all, doing these flag splits, once you do know your kind of country of origin for different commodities, it does allow you to kind of better understand, okay, where are the emissions coming from, and what are the different practices that are driving emissions at farm level, for example. And having that knowledge really can enable companies to make better procurement decisions. On the other hand, we have regulation that is, especially in Europe, on deforestation for commodities, which is going to push the need for transparency further. And then finally, well, maybe there's two final points, is that there is more and more availability of kind of assurance for these types of, for kind of the procurement of different commodities that help to prove perhaps deforestation-free procurement. And I would say it is, out of all the things in sustainability that companies may want to share with end customers, if you're a B2C company, deforestation is something that's very well understood, and that can't be said for everything else that we look at and that we work on. And so it is an area where you can probably do more communication and engagement with your customer base, and where you might also then see a larger kind of willingness to pay more for products that can kind of prove this sort of general ethical value chains for their products. So hopefully some good news to end on.
Thank you. That's definitely good news. I mean, I would like to thank lots of people here. It's a bit like the Oscars. First of all, I do want to thank our events team, Raf and Liam, who have been amazing in the background, making sure that nothing has broken, that the audience has been able to hear everything, which is great. And Stacey on our team, who is our events manager, who has done a fantastic job. I would like to thank my colleagues, Tom and Tiff and Toby for participating. And finally, and very, very importantly, I'd like to thank our panelists, Joanne, Nick, and Lynn, for joining us, for sharing their perspectives candidly, honestly, without too much, without holding back, because this is not the time to hold back, to accelerate to net zero. This is the time to say stuff, to be honest and candid. So I hope you've enjoyed it. As far as I know, this has been recorded, so those of you who would like to share with colleagues can share the link. And yes, and have a fantastic Wednesday and a great end of the week.